Hey everyone, welcome back to another HR Heretics show today. I am so excited to welcome Lucy Adams. Lucy joins us right outside of London. What's your town's name again?
It's a place called Stockbridge. So imagine those Jane Austen films, It's like that.
I love that. So, Lucy, you've been doing this for, almost 30 years, I'd say, plus or minus, looking at your background.
That makes me feel old.
Yeah, it's great. Roles all over the place, HR leader roles at different industries and sectors. And for the last 11 years, you've been running Disruptive HR, which is a term that we're going to pull apart today to kind of think about how you think about that word, what it means, what you're seeing out in the market, what you've learned for our audience. And HR roles you've had before this, I have to call it out, is BBC, which I love. You were HR leader at BBC out in London.
It's just an amazing place, I mean, anyone who grew up in Britain in the kind of, 70s and 80s, it was the backdrop to your life, right? So to get the opportunity to go and work at this place that I had loved all my life was incredible. And it was incredible, but it's one of those jobs you absolutely love and never want to do again. You're in the public spotlight, you're in the media, and in HR, we're not kind of used to that, I mean, I remember my kind of onboarding. I had to meet with the head of PR and communications, and he's like, right, tell me straight away, have you got a cocaine habit? I'm like, what? I was like, no. And have you got an industrial size shredder? Because the press are going to go through your bins.
I'd love to start with Disruptive HR. Tell us about how maybe the years leading up to you thinking you want to do this and why you chose that word.
I'm kind of long in the tooth HR director, done that role for most of my professional career. And I kind of always had slight reservations that the stuff we were doing wasn't really working or wasn't really having the impact. I remember at the BBC going along and talking to them about the fact that it was the news division. And I was like, great guys, we've simplified the performance management process. We're only going to rate people out of 3 rather than 5, and you can do it all on one page. And I was thinking, they're going to love this. And they're like, why do you keep coming along and depressing us? And it was really during my time at the BBC where we were going through significant change, whether it be digital or, changing workplace expectations, etc. And there was I still doing HR like I'd done in the 1990s. So by the time my kind of stint at the BBC was coming to an end, myself and my co-founder, Karen Moran, we went for a very long lunch in Covent Garden. And we're like, look, can we take our shared frustrations and do something with this, get off our backsides and actually come up with ways in which HR could be fit for a disrupted world. So that's where disruptive HR comes from. And that's what we've been doing for the last 10, 11 years. I think so much of what HR does is because we don't trust managers to manage. We speak to thousands of HR people every year. And if you ask them kind of what's their number one issue, it's we have poor managers with poor capability. But their response to that is very much around, well, let's design a process that makes them do certain things. Unfortunately, a lot of the processes that we make them do don't actually generate the things we want. They don't improve performance and motivation. They don't actually help with talent mobility. And I think increasingly HR people are struggling with how to respond to the calls that come from leadership. So client of ours, they had this great thing where they could bring their dog to work, right? One day a dog was brought in that had fleas. And the first thing that they do is, right, HR, design me a policy about dogs with fleas, and the whole, the joy sucked out of it, designing around one individual. Trust is so important. If you feel trusted, you are more likely to be able to embrace change, to challenge the status quo, to be curious, to be open, all the things we need in a disrupted world. If we don't trust, then what we aim for is passivity, compliance. People wait to be told, they wait to be given permission. And I don't think that sets our businesses up for success. If you don't trust somebody, deal with the individual.
We had this similar policy at a company I worked at, and it was great for many years until somebody brought a dog that took a dump in the office. It smelled all day long. And then it's like, well, now we don't want this again. And so what we did was we actually removed that policy. It is utopic, right, Kelly, to like try and design policies around people like who you do trust. But then once it gets fractured and it impacts the business, you don't want to deal with it again.
I think you have to look at the opportunity costs that you are missing out on if you design around the minority. So if you're creating an environment where you're screaming at your people, we don't actually trust you, even though there's no proof that they are going to do anything wrong. The vast majority of us want to come to work, to behave decently, do a decent job. I'm not saying we're all stars, but I think the vast majority of people actually want to come to work and do a decent job. And if you as an employer are saying you don't trust the majority of your people, what are you doing? I remember working with a company. They advised government on nuclear strategy. These are serious-minded, amazing individuals advising governments on nuclear strategy, but they weren't trusted to have the keys to the stationery cupboard. It's like, come on, we've got to kind of get real here. If you look at those organizations that have a high trust environment, then on every measure, productivity, innovation, even stress levels, they go in the right direction.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors. AI changes how work gets done. Recruiting is no exception. Metaview is the AI platform purpose-built for recruiting. If you're looking to level up your AI adoption and see real impact from intake to offer, it's a no-brainer. Metaview's suite of AI agents works for you at every stage of the hiring process. Their platform powers instant job post creation, AI-powered candidate Q&A, insights on pipeline performance, compensation, and so much more. I've seen firsthand how tough it can be to extract consistently high-quality data from candidate conversations. I've been in candidate debriefs where interviewers told us about their feelings instead of what actually happened in the interview. And I've seen VPs and CEOs block hires because they didn't learn anything from skeleton scorecards. Metaview changes all of that. For every candidate in every pipeline, bring radical efficiency and precision to your hiring process with perfect data from every conversation. Metaview covers all of your compliance needs, works with all of your existing tools, and takes less than 3 minutes to set up. Join talent leaders at more than 3,000 elite companies like Brex, Deel, 11 Labs, and Quora, and check out Metaview. Just head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of Metaview's product experts or get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes.
You wrote an article around the HRBP role recently. And you posed the question, which is like, is this the toughest role in HR? So can you just kind of like lay out the premise for the article and tell the audience what it was about?
I just really feel for HR business partners. I've done that role, and we meet lots of HR business partners who are trying to meet so many needs on so many fronts. But as an HR business partner, you are torn between the needs of the group and your CPO and your centers of expertise who are trying to push the latest kind of initiative. You're trying to meet the needs of your business unit. And quite often they're the ones paying your salary. And I don't think we have equipped business partners with the necessary skills. I think we focused a lot on employee relations, whereas actually I think the role is much more of a judgment role. It's about a coaching and facilitation role rather than being the expert who everybody comes to for the answer. Tell me what I should do. I think the best HR business partners are the ones that are saying, tell me what it is you're trying to achieve. What decision would you have got to if I wasn't here? Let me kind of think through how we can achieve that. And that takes judgment and experience. And there's no kind of clear manual for that.
The best one that I've ever been around, the thing that she did is exactly what you're saying, which is kind of like working backwards from like, what is our goal here? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? And then deconstructing those things. If I think in the context of it's 2025 right now, how should we organize and how should we think about this role and where should this role sit in the business? I feel like calling somebody an HRBP, it's just like immediately putting that title on somebody makes it impossible because of exactly what you said, Lucy, right? They serve many masters. Like they have to look out for themselves, right? Are they helping, lubricate the machine, or are they actually adding friction and slowing things down?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it quite often, almost like an account director role, you know, an account manager, somebody that actually is not necessarily doing all the work, but is there pulling in expertise where it's needed. They know that part of the business inside out, so they're able to ask the great questions, and then they pull together the solution that works. Again, another client of ours, big retail organization. The chief exec was sat down with the HR director and going, what is this, a business partner? And it's like, well, it's like somebody that helps with HR. And it's like, why are you calling it a business partner? I don't think it's necessarily an impossible role, but I think the caliber of people going into it needs to be a lot higher than perhaps we see. I think that unfortunately people who have only done policy or process work and they're suddenly told, right, you're now a strategic business partner. A lot of the people who worked in my team in that role, they got their kicks from ensuring compliance, helping managers, but ultimately they're not there to help. They're there to create the conditions where people can do their best work. So it's stakeholder management. It's about providing insights to leaders and managers about their people and then coaching them and the best way of getting the right answers and the right solutions for those people. I think great HR is really messy. And I don't think we should be apologetic for that. I think we've tried so much to emulate finance, you know, with our language like human capital and return on investment. And actually, I think it is in the grey. Great HR is messy and it's not perfect. And I think, you know, our superpower is that we get people and people are messy. And have you ever watched Billions? Do you remember the HBO series Billions? Oh, so you know the kind of psychologist character. To me, she's the best HR person. You know, she is super bright. She is all about performance and the individuals, but she embraces the fact she knows people. I'm not saying we all should become psychologists, but I think we could lose some of the process, lose some of the policy and say, actually, what does help someone improve their performance? It's certainly not giving them a rating at the end of the year. It's about small course corrections. How do we improve engagement? It's not about doing an annual survey or, you know, kind of initiatives. It's actually about people feeling that they're trusted and given flexibility. It's about, you know, so what are we doing around reward? You know, we're still churning out bonuses, which we know do not surprise and delight, do not make people feel good. You ask them what's the best reward they ever had at work. No one mentions the end of year bonus net of tax 6 months after year end. They'll talk about the handwritten note, you know, they'll talk about the customized gift that was just for them. They'll talk about the shout out in the team meeting, or we know this stuff. And yet we don't deploy it when we come to design our approach.
Yeah, it reminds me of, like, remember that segment we did a while ago, Nolan, where Chimoff on the All In podcast said HR should not exist. I don't feel strongly that HR should or shouldn't exist, but I do feel strongly that if it doesn't, the work exists. And I think that's what we're talking about are these labels. And it doesn't really matter where it sits or what the org is called, that work does need to exist. And I totally agree with you, Lucy. Like I grew up as an HRBP. It's my DNA. It's like what I've been doing for 25 years. And you can't just like go to a weekend seminar and learn how to be a good HR. Like there's nothing in there that you can like read and do. It's why when I coach HR leaders, I'm like, this is, whether you're good or not at this is a sixth sense. It's not the five senses. It's a very nuanced, artful, right time, right place, right tone, like, and it doesn't really matter where it sits or what it's called. You know what I mean? So,
and I think we can get so obsessed with titles in HR, can't we? You know, I'll often get, God, like, why are you called disruptive HR? You know, HR is such an old fashioned term. And it's like, don't worry about the label. Think about the contents, you know, get the contents right. And the label, it doesn't matter. Should we call it head of people experience? Should we call it people and culture? You know, I think only teams that are anxious and lack confidence are worrying about what they're called. Similarly, teams that individuals who lack confidence are worried about a seat at the top table, and they get very anxious about that positional power. I've been on boards and not on boards, and it hasn't made one iota of difference to how well I could influence. It's all about the relationships. It's all about that judgment call that you described.
So you have 140,000 people that follow Disruptive HR on LinkedIn. What are you hearing from that community right now? Like, what are they saying about what's top of mind for them?
The DEI thing is big. So concerns about kind of where it goes. Is there a kind of pushback post the Trump administration? By the way, where I stand on that is that I think some of the chief execs have been perhaps blatantly opportunistic about using this to roll back on things they didn't agree with in the first place. But equally, I think D&I can be done so differently. And again, it's all about relationships and the conversations. It's not about policies and process and compliance and targets. So I think actually we can use it to reset. So that's a biggie. AI, huge, obviously. But I think it varies between those organizations and HR teams who have embraced it and the vast majority of HR people who are going, whoa, I don't even know where to get started with this. Fortunately, I think the kind of human-centric design of HR is coming through, using agile techniques, using marketing techniques to use, things like employee persona and customize the experience. That's interesting. And I think that's a biggie that's coming through. And then it's the old stuff that's still there. Like, what do we do about managers who shouldn't be anywhere near human beings? It's like they didn't want to be people managers, and we've still got them, and we're still having to deal with them. So there's this real dichotomy. On the one hand, it's like super sexy AI futuristic stuff. And on the other, it's like, how do I get them to have a conversation with their team?
On the DEI thing, so I was at Transform last week, and one of the panels mentioned a new acronym that I hadn't heard, which was JEDI, which is Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So when you think good DE&I is not about policy, but is instead about conversations, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, just by the way, I think, having another acronym is the last thing we need. So let me give you the Atlassian example. So they were looking at how they could improve the conversation around diversity, equity, inclusion, because they found that there were people who were very vocal, who were interested, and there were those who were probably the ones in power in the majority that were feeling a little bit either anxious about it, don't want to say the wrong thing, don't want to upset someone, or were thinking this has got nothing to do with me. So the conversations were struggling. A lot of feelings weren't being addressed, a lot of thoughts weren't being aired, people were getting shouted down. And so they changed the conversation. They said, look, let's stop talking about minority groups and how do we get more ethnic minorities or women or whatever it is. Let's instead talk about how do we build more balanced teams. So it was a way of taking the language into something that actually we can all agree with. Have you seen that Accenture Inclusion Starts With I? It's a great video on YouTube that's very simple, very powerful. But it's just about, you've got, white middle-aged men talking about what inclusion or exclusion means to them as well. We've got to find a way of opening up the conversation, giving it more acronyms, focusing more on unconscious bias training and so on. I don't think it's going to work. It's small little tweaks. It is enabling a conversation that doesn't alienate and frighten people. It is about small little nudges that we can do at the point where people are making decisions. It's not putting people on mandatory diversity training. This is not a quick fix. This is small. So Nestle, they said, instead of talent reviews being about asking the question, who are your brightest and best? Who are your stars? So unconscious bias has already kicked in. They said, look, we're going to start a different conversation, which is that you come to the talent review with the assumption that everyone in your team is ready to do something different, not get promoted, but do something different. come to be prepared to talk about everybody. So it's just small things, none of which in and of itself is going to change things dramatically. But I do think the answer lies in keeping a conversation going that is open and doesn't alienate people. And I think the risk is that we're seeing a polarization. And for those organizations who are still very pro DEI, there is the risk that a lot of the conversations just go underground, and that's not going to change anything.
Yeah. In 2016, we had a DEI leader at the company I was at, and she left. I didn't backfill the job for that exact reason, and kind of got tomatoes thrown at me.
In some ways, it's more important. It's more important, but it's equally important that, you know, middle-aged white guys feel that they have a voice. And I know that, you know, there's a view, well, they've had a voice for so long and they've had the majority and they've had the power. But ultimately, if we're going to change things, we have to engage with them. And I think there's a risk that we have ceased to engage many of them.
Yeah. I also think we just need to start talking more about merit. Like we had Joelle on, Kelly, and I think the most salient point I've heard somebody make on this topic is like, the ultimate goal is merit. And I feel like that word has been tarnished a bit, but I think the ultimate goal is merit. And so if merit is the thing, like, let's just talk about that and remove all of the other acronyms. And I think you can very quickly get people on board once you start talking about merit.
I think so. I think so.
Awesome. Well, Lucy, this was a blast. Thank you so much for the time. Where can people find you?
So best place is probably the website, disruptivehr.com, or they can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lucy.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.